Now on WCCO's Voices.
When my son was murdered, I was 60, and I'm 68 now, and I'm still fighting for my son and for all of our children.
Black people have never had the luxury of complaining. We've always had to activate.
It's very rewarding to have this honor to fulfill a legacy that our parents have started.
Before my process, I felt like I wasn't heard. Today, I felt like I'm being heard.
Those are a few of the Minnesotans we'll meet on this episode of WCCO's Voices. I'm Reg Chapman. Thanks for joining me as we explore the diverse voices of our community. We start with a mother separated from her child for years who led the charge to keep families together. Caroline Cummings explains how it aims to cut down on racial disparities in the child welfare system.
He's happy, he's healthy, he's energetic.
Declara Tripp gushes when she talks about her 9-year-old son, Zachary. She says they're especially close now after being separated for years.
I didn't have no education as a lawyer, I didn't have an education as a doctor, but what I did have is the love for my son, And so I continued to fight for him.
Tripp says one day when her son was months old, he grew limp and stopped breathing. She rushed him to the hospital where doctors told her he had a brain bleed, often seen in traumatic injuries like those from car accidents or abuse.
None of those things happened to him.
Ultimately, Zachary was removed from his home and put in foster care. Tripp fought for years to get him back and reunite him with her other children and clear her name. On Wednesday, she joined DFL Governor Tim Walz and other advocates to celebrate a new step forward. A new law designed to spare other families similar trauma passed with bipartisan support this year. African-American youth make up 9% of the state population, but 18% of children removed from their homes.
The majority of the families that are coming into the system are involved for issues more closely related to poverty than actual abuse against their children, so they're in need of concrete services.
The law requires social services agencies to make active efforts to prevent out-of-home placement of African-American children and other kids disproportionately represented in the welfare system. It sets new standards for when courts can terminate parental rights and orders courts to place a child in a willing and able relative's home before foster care.
Before my process, I felt like I wasn't heard. Today, I felt like I'm being heard.
Caroline Cummings, WCCO News.
The law currently applies to Hennepin and Ramsey counties. It expands statewide over 3 years. Well, it has been 8 years since Philando Castile was shot and killed by a St. Anthony police officer during a traffic stop for a busted taillight. Despite Castile's compliance in the traffic stop, he was shot 5 times at close range in a live-streamed death. I spoke with Castile's mother, who told me her son's death is inspiring young justice seekers.
I think about my son every day. I'm doing okay, but it never gets better.
Valerie Castile says the pain associated with losing her son, Philando Castile, has motivated her to turn tragedy into healing.
Because of the things that Philando did, being at school early enough to help the children with disabilities get off the bus and make sure all the kids were fed, even though he paid out of his pocket sometimes. That was important for me to rally for food insecurities within our school systems.
Philando was a nutrition services supervisor at J.J. Hill Montessori Magnet School in St. Paul. Because of how he cared for students there, Valerie started the Philando Castile Relief Foundation. She raised funds to pay off cafeteria debt of kids who can't afford school lunch. Her work led to Governor Tim Walz signing a bill providing a basic breakfast and lunch to every kid in Minnesota. Those kids Philando served graduated high school this spring.
A lot of those kids ended up at Central High School. And to see such a large crowd of graduates this year, and they had top honors.
And she says many of them are going into law enforcement and studying social justice to continue honoring Philando's legacy.
It's important to keep his memory alive.
The site where Philando lost his life at the hands of police now serves as a location of a beautiful garden created in his memory. She hopes people come to a vigil in his honor to share what they've done in these past 8 years to help improve the lives of others.
I don't want it to be a sad day. I want us to come together and fellowship and uplift one another and empower one another and just live in peace and harmony.
Reg Chapman, WCCO News. Valerie Castile spoke at a vigil honoring Philando's memory. She told family, friends, and supporters the loss is immeasurable.
You never know the potential of Philando. We knew him in the here and now,
but we would never get the chance to see his full potential as a black man, as a human man, as a caring man, as a kind man. We would never see that. But I can tell you that's who he was, and that's who he continues to be through his soul and through us. Because we carry Philando in our hearts, and his murder and this tragedy is etched in our minds.
You can find this extended clip of Valerie Castile's impassioned plea in the Voices section of youtube.com/WCCO. Minnesota is renewing a program aimed at preventing deaths like Castile's. The Lights On program allows cops to give out vouchers to get broken lights fixed instead of handing out tickets. Lights On has been around for several years but was in danger because funding through an anonymous donor was sunsetting. This year, the state signed off on $1.2 million to keep it going. Here's how it works. Participating departments replace equipment violation tickets with vouchers for repairs up to $250. They have to go to participating auto repair shops, which then bills Lights On for the fees. So far, 130 agencies in Minnesota have signed on with more than 10,000 vouchers redeemed to date. The average cost of repair is $211. It is an officer's discretion whether to give a voucher.
Departments are trying to rebuild that relationship or build on a positive relationship. The next generation of great cops is going to come to the department because they feel they have a trusting relationship and they want to be part of that relationship.
Republicans and Democrats both backed this bill this year. Harrington, who was a police chief for St. Paul and the commissioner for Minnesota Department of Public Safety, says he was heartened to see that support for good policing across party lines. Now, Minnesota's fourth Minnesota Dispensary is now open just about an hour from the Twin Cities. WCCO's David Chaney explains that it's possible thanks to a unique Native American business agreement.
The closest marijuana dispensary to the Twin Cities is now Island Pejee, which means grass in the Dakota language. It's on Prairie Island Indian Community land in Welch, owned and operated by the tribal nation.
Being able to diversify our economy and bring in other revenue sources for our community that, relies on these type of businesses to have our government function is very important.
Blake Johnson with PIIC says money made here will go toward health care and education for the tribe. Plus, the shop employs about 3 dozen people.
We have a couple of members that have never had a job before. This opportunity gives them that, and they're excited to be employed.
Tiny hitch, though, the Prairie Island people don't yet grow or cultivate marijuana on their own. They've entered a unique business arrangement to stock their shelves, buying flower from the White Earth Nation.
A long time ago, tribes used to have intertribal agreements to trade goods. It helps support each other and be able to move in a way that is good for everybody.
Certainly good for Rick Smithke, who stopped in while visiting from the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area.
I've been to dispensaries in Vegas, Illinois, Michigan, and this is by far the decorations, the inside, the atmosphere, everything is really chill, laid back.
Minnesota's Native American tribes have been first into this budding industry, and until the floodgates of competition eventually open,
we can help be able to supply the Minnesota market right away, and we're here for that.
In Welch, David Schumann, WCCO News.
Another local tribe supplies Minnesota with wild rice. For those who gather, it has deep meaning.
I think about those old Indians that were there before me. All my relatives, the more tired that I get, this feels like this closer that I am to them.
A traditional ricer shares how the local tribe cultivates both food and spirituality. In Minnesota's poorer, more diverse neighborhoods are hotter than neighboring communities. We'll break down what that means next. Welcome back to Voices. In a rare move, Minneapolis publicly honored an unwavering dedication to justice and empowerment. Spike Moss spent decades fighting for his community, much of that time along Plymouth Avenue. It was recently named Spike Moss Way, an honor usually only given posthumously. I had a chance to sit down with fellow community activists about Moss's impact.
Is in civil rights. It will remain in civil rights.
Spike Moss committed his life to fighting injustice in 1966.
Most people have no clue what he's given.
We want all of this nonsense and violence to cease.
What he's given to Minneapolis, North Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities, and actually to America.
Tyrone Terrell has worked alongside Spike Moss for more than 40 years, seeing resilience and unwavering commitment.
Brother Spike always gets results, and he's willing to put himself on the line.
How can you tell us that the kingpins that serve the dope to the nation just walk?
He calls Moss his big brother and smiles when he talks about this community champion.
Whether it was the bus jobs or police or fire or General Mills, you name it, he's been at that table.
Moss was instrumental in diversifying Metro Transit. He pushed an initiative forcing them to hire black bus drivers at a time that wasn't allowed. At a time when fire departments questioned the intelligence and physical prowess of blacks, Spike successfully advocated for desegregation, allowing African Americans to work as firefighters. He also battled police brutality and advocated for the recruitment of black police officers.
His history in this movement.
We have to give back a future from a generation that this society has wrote off.
It's unbelievable, brother.
Terrell says history books will never show the impact Spike Moss has made on the culture, like his role as the youngest director of The Way, Opportunities Unlimited, a nonprofit community center.
All the things, programming that benefit the community. Print. Everybody learned to play the guitar in the basement of The Way with famous brother Sonny Thompson, you know. And so The Way was where you played your sports, where you got academic help, and the name was so perfect, The Way, showing young black kids the way to success. And it was led by him.
It was 1966 at The Way, Opportunity Unlimited, Incorporated, 1313 Plymouth Avenue North.
You never forget that.
Never forget it.
Shane Price met Spike Moss when he was a 12-year-old student at Lincoln Junior High.
The Way was pivotal in kind of directing that traffic, directing the traffic of young Negroes who had become African Americans, directing the traffic of individuals and organizations who wanted to be helpful but didn't know how to plug in. And The Way was that nucleus for both.
Moss's impact on his life led Price to a career working with young people and spending time in Minnesota prisons, helping educate and rehabilitate.
I believe that consistency is the only thing that grants true, authentic authority. Spike has been absolutely, positively consistent in his advocacy for a better way of life for the African American people.
A fight this octogenarian is still fighting today, and now recognized more visibly for everyone to see.
The street that he put so much of his life into, now will hold his name.
Spike Moss is still working for positive change in the community, and he's not the only one. Susan Elizabeth Littlefield sat down with 3 local women recognized this year for their leadership.
Salsa?
Everything. It's lunchtime at the Regents Hospital cafeteria. It's also story time.
This dish is inspired by one of my classes called Soul Food Fusion.
Chef Cunningham is using soul food to teach history.
My mission is to impact people through food, and I do that because I want to see healing in my community and in the world.
And now she's got some extra financial support. She is one of 24 recipients of the Distinguished Bush Fellowship. It's a program started by one of the founders of 3M that funds community missions for 2 years.
What did it feel like to get the news?
Oh my goodness, I screamed so loud. It was amazing. It was, it was a long road. This is actually my 3rd time applying, so it was like 3 times the charm. I really resonate with the resilience piece because that's what, honestly, it takes to, what it took for my ancestors to really make it through enslavement. That's what it took for my people to make it to where we are today, and that's what it's going to take us to continue to evolve and improve.
And she's in good company.
2024 is just the year. It's the year for us to be Bush Fellows, and I'm super excited.
Alicia Price is a co-parenting coach and author.
Whether we're parenting across households or in the same household, bringing back the power of the Black family.
So is Leslie Redmond, founder of Don't Complain, Activate.
Black people have never had the luxury of complaining. We've always had to activate. And so as we sit here on Juneteenth, we are still activating, and activation won't stop.
Not with leaders like this.
On this Juneteenth, what are you most proud of about your culture? I'm really proud of the contribution that African Americans have made to our nation's history and the culture in and of itself.
In spite of all that we've endured, that there's still joy and there's still love. And when we recognize that we have an abundance of love, there's almost nothing that we cannot do.
With photojournalist Joe Berglove in St. Paul, Susan Elizabeth Littlefield, WCCO News.
Each of these leaders applied for the Bush Fellowship 3 times before they got it. They say it's a lesson for everyone to keep trying and keep believing. Turning now to a topic you might not be surprised to learn impacts some neighborhoods differently than others: summer heat. Next, weather meteorologist Adam Del Rosso shows us how.
You've probably heard the term before, the urban heat island effect.
As we replace open space that's permeable and moist with roads and infrastructure that's dry and impermeable, that draws in heat.
City blocks trap more heat, but it turns out not all neighborhoods are the same. Climate Central looked at 65 different urban heat islands, including Minneapolis. They found various hotspots that are significantly impacting 68% of the 50 million residents in the study. Michael Krish and his team at the Brown Institute were able to link that disparity in warming to the 1930s practice known as redlining, which barred black families from certain neighborhoods.
Redlined areas currently experience hotter summer temperatures than non-redlined communities in about 84% of major U.S. cities. And the disparities aren't small.
In Minneapolis, less affluent neighborhoods run up to 8 degrees hotter. In Rochester, it's a difference of nearly 7 degrees. And in St. Paul, the difference is closer to 3 degrees. As human-induced climate change continues to heat our planet, cities will need to use data like this to help mitigate dangerous heat impacts on city residents.
Extreme heat is the deadliest weather-related event that we experience. Heat is dangerous for everyone, but it's especially dangerous for those that might not have resources to cool off.
Adam Del Rosso, WCCO News.
Adam Del Rosso joins us now. Adam, let's talk about why this is so dangerously, especially for people with fewer resources.
Well, when it comes to heat, it's the deadliest weather element that there is, which surprises a lot of people. You think it's severe thunderstorms or flooding. Heat kills about 200 Americans every year. That's more than double the number 2 killer, which is flooding. So that right there off the bat tells us this is an issue that we need to tackle. And when you think about it, our bodies, you feel that heat, right? You feel it in your heart. You sweat more. You become dehydrated. You lose electrolytes. And then that just has a trickle-down effect on the rest of our bodies. So for those with fewer resources, it's just that much more difficult to cool off. That's the simple solution here, is cooling off, avoiding the heat. But for some of us, that's more difficult than others.
8 degrees may not sound like a big number, but why is this really meaningful for people who live in these Minnesota neighborhoods?
The issue comes around whenever these heat waves are prolonged, right? Whenever you have a long duration heat wave, it doesn't really give your body the chance to cool off and get back to normal, especially at night, because these hot spots are usually filled with more concrete and other surfaces that not only absorb the heat, but radiate it back out at nighttime. So these communities are warmer not only during the day, but also at night. And so whenever you have these prolonged periods with extreme heat and humidity as well, that just takes a prolonged toll on our body and makes the health impacts even worse.
Now, your story did mention that cities need to work on solutions. And what are some of the type of solutions that our cities around here in the urban core need to work on?
Well, the first thing you always hear of during heat waves are cooling centers, right? We need to make sure that all of these hot spots have those cooling centers, but we also need to advertise them and let people know that they are there, providing transportation to them, because usually folks with fewer resources, that might mean not having a car or a way to get there. So making sure that the folks can get to these spaces, but also planting more trees. And making sure that there are green spaces and parks for folks to go and cool off. Because if you've walked into a park before, you feel that cool down immediately. I mean, it might not be a drastic temperature drop off, but enough to where it's going to help our bodies.
Some relief. And so what other things can people do to protect themselves?
Well, the basics would be to seek shade, whether that is under a tree if you have to be outside, or just staying inside, drinking lots of water, making sure you stay hydrated and you don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to feel more of those health impacts. Avoiding alcohol, that's a dehydration, or alcohol is a dehydrant. I don't know what the proper form of that word would be, but yeah, you want to make sure you limit that. But if you don't have AC at home or friends with AC, going to the mall or a grocery store or the library, somewhere like that where you can make sure you can keep cool.
Great tips. Thanks a lot, Adam. A Minnesota couple experienced injustice and decided they needed to stop it from happening to others.
If you have disability in Liberia, society don't count you amongst the population.
They share their journey to make sure hundreds of abandoned kids get a safe place to call home. Plus, a local business owner feels like she's fulfilling a family legacy, thanks in part to a state fair opportunity. She'll tell us why next. A Blaine couple says they understand what it means to be discarded and neglected by your community. They want to keep it from happening. Susan Elizabeth Littlefield explains it was their motivation to make sure hundreds of abandoned children have a home.
So these, I think, were all donations.
Agnes and Prince Cole know the struggle.
And living in Africa with disability was really, really hard. I went through a lot.
Agnes was born with one leg shorter. Prince became sick as a teen in Liberia and lost use of his legs and one arm.
If you have disability in Liberia, society don't count you amongst the population. So it was very difficult for me in Liberia. I was rejected, I was neglected.
For me, I was taken advantage of Sarah's time, but yet it didn't really stop me from achieving, like going to school and stuff, because I knew that I wanted to be independent.
So the couple came to America.
And then one day she was studying, I was in the living room, a phone call came from Liberia, and it was one of her friends with disability, and said, Agnes, we are starving. As I'm speaking to you, we lost 2 kids with disability because of starvation. So we need your help.
In a Minnesota snowstorm, Prince went to TCF Bank and sent every penny they had, $110 worth. And that was the start of Disability Motivational Network. And in just a few short years, they built an accessible orphanage.
When we open the gate, sometimes we see in Liberia 3-4 kids with disability lying on the floor. And we can't send them away, so we have to bring them in.
Just abandoned?
Yeah, just abandoned. So most of the kids on the orphanage, we don't know where it comes from. Yeah, but we're taking care of them.
They now have more than 100 residents, 300 school children that they support, and they put 20 kids in college. Their eyes now are on adults.
99% of the hospitals in Liberia are not accessible. Not at all.
So they can't even get in. So they just built a new accessible clinic.
This is a nursing station.
When you start, you won't be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. But with positive attitudes, you can accomplish lots of achievements in this life, especially when you have a disability.
I feel motivated, Prince. You're good at this, right?
I told you, he's good.
In Blaine, Susan Elizabeth Littlefield, WCCO News.
Through the Disability Motivation Network, Agnes and Prince have finished their accessible clinic and are looking for local donations of medical equipment and furniture. Now, heading to northern Minnesota, the pristine wetlands and waters of Lake Winnipesaukee make for some of the best areas for growing and harvesting wild rice. Amelia Santinello introduces us to a man who uses that tradition to connect to his heritage.
I've been ricing since I was 6 years old.
Dave Bismarck's love of ricing started young. The tradition is deeper than a means to a meal. It was a calling. The Ojibwe are an Anishinaabe people who originally lived in the northeastern part of the U.S.
Someone got a vision, or they were told to move west to where where the food grew on the water. So the Anishinaabe people started to move west till we came to the wild rice here.
And for generations, every fall, the Leech Lake Band has been harvesting these waters.
All this is rice. The actual harvesting of wild rice is done with a canoe, but basically it's any way that you can get out into the rice bed and take the rice kernels off.
It is done many ways, but typically one person stands in the back steering while the other knocks the rice off into the canoe.
They're made out of cedar, and one for each hand. You use one to pull the rice in, and then you use the other one to swipe the rice heads, and all the rice will fall into your boat, and you go with each side.
As soon as the rice comes off the lake, it gets parched over fire so the hull can be removed.
Some people like to dry it first. Some people like to take it straight off the lake. It just depends on, there's no one way to do it.
While it can be profitable, ricing is also a way to connect with the land and loved ones.
I think about those old Indians that were there before me. All my relatives, the more tired that I get, it feels like the closer that I am to them. And it's not just food or income, it is also a spirituality that we really get full on when we're out ricing.
The Minnesota State Fair is right around the corner, and we now know what new foods you can sample this year. If you're a die-hard State Fair fan, there's a pretty good chance you've already checked out this list. 33 new foods to try, from savory eclairs and Afro poppers on a stick to PB bacon cakes. There's a lot to taste. St. Paul's El Burrito Mercado was one of 6 new vendors featured at the State Fair this year.
It feels very fulfilling, you know, as our parents as immigrants came in starting this little 800 square foot marketplace, not knowing the business would grow to what it has now.
We have a complete list of the new tastes at WCCO.com. After 4.5 decades, we're saying goodbye and good luck to a longtime photojournalist here at WCCO. As Dave Chaney gets ready to retire, John Lordson helps us honor a local legend behind the lens.
And when you're young, you don't really realize how big this job is until you do it for a while.
March 8th, 1978, Dave Chaney, a young man from Shell Lake, Wisconsin, was hired as a sound guy for WCCO. Just 8 months later, he was promoted to photographer.
Well, I said I've been in the room with every president since Reagan in my career now.
From political conventions to chasing hurricanes.
Hurricane Andrew? Do you remember that?
Yes, I certainly do.
I remember we found that little boy, the house had fallen on him.
Right.
And we mentioned that he was a Twins fan, so that night they sent us a bunch of Twins stuff overnight.
And today, Esme and photojournalist Dave Chaney delivered it to Juan.
The job also took Dave and his camera around the world.
Well, I have traveled to Bosnia, to Africa, Saudi Arabia. But some of my favorite stories are the farm stories that I'm doing last week with John Lawrence. You know, it's just, I love being out with the people.
Going places that I've never been. He covered the first ever Farm Aid event with Willie Nelson as the headliner. And he met his Hollywood and TV heroes like Clint Eastwood.
I thought I was too old for this kind of carrying on.
And Red Fox, proving the past 46 years have come with perks, especially when he got to ride in the Channel 4 helicopter.
I said my kid's mother, only reason she went with me because I got her a ride in the helicopter. Okay. That was a Playboy move there, you know.
With wit and humor, Dave did it all while helping to raise his 3 daughters, a career that gave him a front row seat to history, yet he considers his greatest accomplishment is being a dad.
You know Dave Chaney, you know he loves his daughters.
Maybe that's what I've learned the most from him is how to be a dad, which sounds kind of crazy, but it's true.
My youngest daughter is going in this field. I'm proud as I can be that but she grew up in this station.
So he'll retire as a caretaker of Minnesota history and a caretaker of WCCO.
When you've been in this business as long as I have, a lot of your friends have left and moved on, and then we get new people who are just as good, and they love the business, and that's what I love about WCCO. But that's the thing, the stories keep changing, but it's good people, and that's WCCO. It's the people.
John Lordson, WCCO News.
One fun fact, Dave claims to have never missed a deadline at WCCO. He hopes to travel and spend more time with his family. We wish him all the best in his retirement. Head to youtube.com/WCCO for more stories giving voice to diverse communities. I'm Reg Chapman. Thanks for joining us for Voices.